Hello, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and I am very excited to share with you some specials that I have been working on. So, I have mentioned in one of my most recent newsletters how I have been thinking about ways that I could use this platform to support all of you even more. We are very fortunate that the guests have come to share their stories, share their wisdom, share different lenses about different practices and techniques that could support all of us on our paths. But again, I just wanted to know how we could dig in even more. So I had this thought that if we had more time to really get to know these teachers, these authors, these healers, if we had more time to just sit with them and go deeper, not just to understand the techniques and the practices, but even to get to know them better, there would have to be a much longer conversation. So I reached out to a handful of people who have been on the podcast before, those who you have told me that you really enjoyed. And I asked them if they would sit with me for 3 hours. And in these 3 hour conversations, they would be broken up within a week. So, what is going to happen, including with this episode, you will have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to enjoy this deep dive conversation with an incredible author, healer, teacher. This week, we get to deep dive with one of my teachers, Frans Stiene. And I have to tell you, I was a little nervous asking people, will you sit with me for 3 hours? Because, everyone's busy and that is an extended amount of time. And Franz said yes. And I really appreciate that he did because, again, it gives us more of an opportunity to really get to know him, perhaps differently than we have in the past. And we go very deep into his perspective around Reiki and the Reiki system and teachings. So, this first conversation that you will hear today, I got to talk to Franz about his path, about his current mode of study, what his own experience has been with the practices within Reiki. But of course, Franz being Franz, he also gives us a lot of information around his view when it comes to the Reiki precepts. We even dive a little bit into talking about some of the Reiki symbols. We talk about the impact of attachment, and what Reiki is really pointing to. So, one of the things I have discovered in my practice of Reiki over the years is it kept pointing back to state of mind. And so we have a great discussion about that. And as always, I am so thankful that we all get to learn from Franz, and this conversation is just the beginning. So if you want to learn more about Franz and his work, you can visit his website, ihreiki.com, which stands for International House of Reiki. And you can also follow him on Instagram at Stiene Franz. And I have the links to connect with Franz down in the show description. So I hope you enjoy this first hour of our conversation, and we'll see you back on Wednesday for part 2. But for now, just get comfortable, and I will see you on the other side. So, as everyone knows, I'm very excited always to speak to my teacher, Franz. Franz, I have to thank you again for sitting with me for an extended period of time so that we can all get to know you better. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. Absolutely fantastic, Yolanda. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And the thing is, I always think if only we got to get to know you a little more, get to go a little deeper with what it is that you practice, what it is you think about the system of Reiki, just all of these different variables. But I guess one of the places we can start with is you and your teaching, or your study, I should say. You
Yeah.
know, so many people are curious about teachers and do they study and what they study. So could you talk a little bit about one, I guess, how your study started, but then also what you do now, because it is very interesting that you go to Japan every year to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is really important as a teacher, and I'm still looking into finding teachers myself, but I also want to have a teacher who still has a teacher,
Yes,
it's because even if we're 80 or 90, we still need to have teachers or people who we can give feedback to or communicate to, or maybe help us to keep ourselves in check. We could
yes.
easily go off the track, it's so easy to do. And so when I first started to practice, to 1999, I learned from a very modern style of Reiki. And then the first time I went to Japan in 2001, I trained with Yakuto Ninomoto. I met up with Mrs. Yamaguchi. And then later on, I trained in 2003. I trained in Hiroshi Doi's style, Gendai Reiki.
Mm,
And in the meantime, also, I did lots of research and I was in contact, particularly 1999, 2000, 2001, with a small group who did a lot of research at that time. And so I also looked at lots of modern Reiki practices.
yeah,
And each time I learned something new, but I also kept looking. I felt for myself, and we're all different, but for myself, I felt something was missing. And the more I looked at the practices taught within the Japanese system of Reiki, like the symbols and the mantras, or Reiju, or what we now call attunement or initiation, the meditation practices like Hatsureiho, Joshin Kokyoho, those kind of elements, then hands-on healing, the Reiki precepts, great reminder. And another thing, what I was never really super crazy about for myself is that a lot of the practices what I was doing or training in, they had called, the teachers themselves had called it a very specific system. So there were very specific systems created, like
mm,
Gendai Reiki or Komyo Reiki or this kind of Reiki, that kind of Reiki. And I am not so good with labels. I've never been. I didn't really like school. It was too much in a too tight frame. It has to be like this and it cannot go any other way.
right,
And for me, a spiritual practice, of course, there needs to be certain ways, and we should not really fear of that in a way. But at the same time, it's also very open, it's expanding, it's moving. And, I think as a teacher, for me personally, we cannot still teach exactly the same as 10 years ago,
right,
right? Because if that's the case, then it means we haven't really been practicing. It needs to evolve. And it doesn't mean that we need to add more practices to it or change everything, but that we need to look at the way of how it has directly, as for example, in this case, me, affected my life. And then how we then look at these meditation practices or the symbols and mantras, etc. And this is also one reason why I still just call it Usui Reiki Regyo.
hmm,
And what, if I look back in all these years of been teaching, has quite changed.
yes,
And not that I'm, again, changing the practices, but maybe the way I look at the practices. So, for example, here, it's a little bit like this. I've got here a phone. And I mean, there's so many different things to do on this phone. But if I say, no, it can only do this and never really explore what is more in that phone, then I can never really get out of it.
yeah,
And so for me, Usui Reiki is a very flexible, moving exciting practice what actually we can go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And when we look at the system of Reiki, we see so many of these deeper layers. And that is why I kept training with teachers. I kept looking at different things. And then finally, in 2012, I found a Japanese teacher. He's a priest, and really looked at where did Reiki come from, for example,
Mhm.
or what does the first mantra or the second mantra or the third mantra or the fourth mantra in Reiki 2 and 3 really mean, or how do they view the precepts, or how do they see hands-on healing? Um, how do they do these kind of meditation practices? And that really helped me to tap into a very more traditional Japanese approach. And I'm not saying one is better than the other.
Right.
It's just a different way. And I think for me as a teacher, it's important that I teach my students from a very basic hand position to a very deep spiritual practice.
Mhm.
We have different options. Of course, the hands-on healing ultimately, the foundation of that is a very deep spiritual practice,
Yes.
because else might get a little bit difficult. Even the hands-on healing itself is quite easy.
Mhm.
Other concepts what we bring or in or might come up, if we don't really practice on ourselves as a spiritual practice, then that can become a little bit tangled. And that's been really an interesting journey, Yolanda, in the last, since 2012. Very exciting, not always easy. My
Yeah.
teacher is one of those very traditional teachers. Um, really points out your faults, your mistakes, your issues. But I quite like that. I find it very challenging. Is not an easy thing, but at the same time, I really like it because that way we can really grow.
Yeah.
And for years now, I put out a daily quote on my Facebook page or on the Key Campus, what I have. And actually, one of the daily quotes today or yesterday, I can't even remember, but it was about how can we see that we've been practicing. And it's not for me that we see more colors or we feel more energy of those kind of things, but really is the embodiment of the precepts. And Mikao points it out so beautiful. How is our anger? How is our worry? How is our gratefulness? How is our true to our way in our being, or how's our practice going? And how is our compassion? Is it constantly changing, or is it actually a compassion what doesn't change according to circumstances? And this, for me, if we really look at it, is the foundation of the system of Reiki. And therefore, I found it a very important element that we look at the precepts, for example, as
Mhm.
the foundation and in our daily life. Again, the precepts, it says today in the precepts. It doesn't say on your meditation pillow or on your Reiki table but actually in your daily life. And this is where healing happens the most, right? How we deal with daily situations, from when we wake up to when we go to bed, or when we wake up in the middle of the night and we have a crappy dream. How do we deal with this?
Yeah.
And therefore, for me, it's actually trying to really bring it back to that foundation of what is the crux of the system of Reiki. And, when I first learned the system of Reiki, the precepts were just, I don't think it was even kind of mentioned. I had to read it in the manual. And I
Yeah.
go like, oh yeah, I understand this. But now when I've been practicing, there is so many layers to it. Like, it's just unbelievable. In this very small, short text we can print out on an A4, and yet we could write 20 books about it
Right.
because it's so deep. And yet the most important is to embody it in our daily life.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying because my experience has been similar in that when I first started learning from various people as well, because I was like, I think there's something more, even though I didn't know what that was, because I didn't know even what I was looking for. And because I was practicing, I was having these changes
Yes.
within myself, within my mind, within my perspective. And I'm like, what is going on? And I talk about it all the time. Meeting you and reading your book, the first time I met you, I mean, it really brought tears to my eyes because you were the first person talking about what I was actually experiencing. That
Yeah.
wasn't just like, standard in classes, so to speak. So I wanted to ask you about that because even with the precepts and even the symbols, I mean, everything within the system, I feel like my mind is constantly blown at how we keep understanding it differently, like how
Yeah.
we keep expanding our mind around it. And so I don't think I've heard that many people talk about how Reiki keeps, for me, pointing to change in my mind,
Yeah.
and like we could say there are things that say like even purifying heart, mind, and these kinds of things, but literally, we could go back to the same one piece of the system and it'll keep helping us change. So, just curious about that with you, because clearly, you having gone to your classes several times, I can see that in you too.
Hmm.
Was that something that you just started to recognize on your own? And how do you feel about that in terms of Reiki in our mind?
Yeah, this is something we could talk about for hours. But first of all, it's also something what I hear a lot in my classes.
Yeah.
I get people who come and do Reiki 1, 2, and 3, or existing Reiki teachers, or assisting Reiki 1 or 2 practitioners. And when they really have been engaging and in the right way,
Mhm.
then there will be changes.
Right.
And then they say, "Oh, Frans, I read this in your book, and this is exactly what I was going through, but no one has told me this." Or,
Mhm.
now I understand what is really happening and why this is happening. And this, in a way, happened to me as well when I
Yeah.
first started to practice, like really, really early on. I was traveling for 2 years. And so I had a lot of time on my hand and I was doing a lot of practices and I had very specific experiences. And at that time, I had a friend where I was living in Darjeeling in the Himalaya. And I knew this guy called Ray. And he was a Buddhist practitioner, Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, and had been living there for a long, long time, studying with the yogi. And so I said, Ray, can I talk to you about? I have this really interesting experience. This is happening. And he's looking at me and he said, Frans, what are you practicing? Are you practicing Buddhism? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, these are exactly the things my teacher is looking at. And this triggered for me what I'm actually practicing
Yeah.
because I had no clue at all. I had absolutely no clue. I was taught some symbols and some hand positions and very vaguely some other things.
Yeah.
So that really triggered my search and to really find indeed that there was very Buddhist roots, no matter if you talk about Zen or Shugendo or Tendai or Shingon Buddhism within the system of Reiki. And yeah, over time, I really start to notice that, for example, things what would trigger me
Hmm.
would actually be softened. So instead that maybe I was angry or pissed off about it for a month, suddenly it was only like 3 weeks, and suddenly it was 2 weeks, and suddenly it was a few days, and suddenly I got like, oh, this is actually not bothering me as much anymore. And of course, there's still heaps of things that bother
Yeah.
me. But now we have a tool. So now I can say, oh, this is really triggering me. And where, of course, this is triggering in my mind. And this is, Yolanda, I found so interesting because often when we read about the system of Reiki, they talk about energy, right?
Right.
But energy and mind are like this. We cannot pull that apart. It's impossible,
Yeah.
right? And one reason it's very easy to see because if I die, then there is still a Frans, there's still a body, but my mind is not there anymore, and therefore also not my energy,
Mhm.
right? So mind and energy are like this. Very easy to see if our mind get triggered, then something is happening with our energy. Like very easy, maybe we sit opposite someone and we feel attracted to them, and that is in our mind, but then we can feel that in our energy. Or
Right.
we eat a nice dish, and we smell it, we taste it, and then we say, oh, but it's the taste or the smell what makes it. And that's not true either, because again, if I die, I still have a nose and I still have a mouth, but I don't smell or taste anything.
Mhm.
Why? Because my mind has left the body.
Right.
So we can really see that Mikao was pointing to the mind again and again and again. Very simple. Look at the precepts. The whole precepts is about a state of mind. Nowhere in the precepts it's talk about hands-on healing. Nowhere it says about energy or seeing things or those kind of things. It really clearly talks about the mind. Also talks about the body. We have in the precept Shin Shin Kaisen, mind body harmony, for example. And this is obviously because this is my body and my mind is here as well. But most of the time, my mind is somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? My mind is distracted to the past or the future or analyzing the present way too much. And again, we can really see this in the precepts. So I started to discover that I became less upset about certain things or got caught up into certain things slowly, slowly, slowly. It softened, everything softened. And of course, when the mind softens, then of course that has a huge effect on your energy and there's a huge effect on your body,
Yeah.
right? So we can also see this concept of mind, body, breath, speech, energy is all under one bracket, breath, speech, energy, very clearly within the system of Reiki. And we cannot throw the body away because then there is no Frans, right? We also cannot grow the breath away, then also no Frans, and we can also not throw the mind away. So we have to look at the whole package within the system of Reiki, mind, body, energy, traditionally called Sanmitsu. And Sanmitsu is so important. But again, the breath is linked to the energy.
Mhm.
No breath, no energy.
Right.
And we all know if my breathing is very shallow, then I don't have much energy. And then probably the reason for this is probably that I'm stressed, right? Too tight, too stressed. Then that will have an effect on my physical body, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And so when I started to look in all of these kind of elements and experiencing this for myself, then I also started to see it within the system of Reiki, right? I think this is what you were already saying. When you went deeper within the system of Reiki, you came across for yourself already certain elements, certain things where you go like, how does this work?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Why am I feeling like this? Why am I noticing certain things? That came truly from your own personal practice. So when we practice correctly, we also start to see the correct results. And that's with anything, no matter if I use a vacuum cleaner. If I don't use the vacuum cleaner correctly, then I don't see the correct results, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's still lots of dust. And I go, why isn't it? Oh, well, maybe because I'm not doing it correctly. So therefore, yeah, for me, that was really important that your own direct experience. And for me, actually, the teacher is there ultimately to help you to have your own direct experience.
Right.
And in Japanese, this is called gyo. Yeah, we can see gyo or hakame, often translated as work hard. But then when we look at the word work hard, then we think, oh, it's just my 9 to 5 job. But actually, if we translate gyo as practice diligently, means what do we practice diligently, right?
Hmm.
Hands-on healing or not being angry, not being worried, being grateful and being true to or being compassionate to ourselves and others. This is what we have to practice diligently
Right.
in everything we do. And then we feel this softening. Something starts to happen. Something starts to take place. Your practice becomes super juicy, right? It becomes exciting because we can actually feel it. We can taste it with our whole being. And then it's really that we start to embody the teachings more and more and more. And then if someone pushes you, right, then we can see what actually comes out. Does anger comes out? Does worry comes out? Does competition comes out,
Yeah.
right? Does love come out, or kindness, or openness? And it's actually there in your daily life. And
Yeah.
this is what, for me, really is the system of Reiki. It's not just laying on a massage table and do hands-on healing on someone
Yeah.
else. It's the basic, right?
Yeah.
But the depth of the system of Reiki is tremendous. But if I, as a teacher, have never tapped into that depth, then I can also not teach it.
Right.
I can repeat someone else's words, but then I just become a parrot. So
Right.
that's also not so good. I have to really experience it with Sanmitsu, with my mind, with my body, with my breath. And then I go, oh, this is really what happened. This is really what the system of Reiki is about.
Yeah. And honestly, that's what excites me about it. Because I
Yeah,
mean, it's like
absolutely.
my mind is constantly blown by, there's a couple of things. One, it's interesting to look at how it becomes very clear some of the things, like all of the different elements within the system keep pointing to the same thing, right? Whether it's the
Yeah,
gokai, the symbols, laying of hand, like it all keeps pointing to the same thing. It's just like,
yeah,
what? But I have to tell you, there's two things where you gave me direct experience, and they are these two things that stand out about, I mean, I've learned a lot from you, but these two things stand out. And the very first time I came to one of your classes, seems like ages ago. I don't even know how long ago it
yeah,
was. And I don't even remember what I asked you, but I asked you something. And you said, pull your chair out here. And I was like, uh-oh, uh-oh, what is going to happen? But anyway, we were sitting a few feet apart from each other.
yeah,
And there was an experience. I'll just say that. There was definitely a non-spoke. It was like you gave me a non-verbal teaching.
yeah,
And I don't remember what I asked, but it really struck me that combined with when you teach chanting, that direction of mind into the hara and the difference of the way sound reverberates through the body, both of those things, both of those experiences with you really gave me a deeper curiosity about direction of mind.
yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
so, even to your point, we can read this again and again. We can read again and again, direct your mind, direct your mind. But you gave experiences that helped me really go, I see what is happening. So
yeah,
then, even when I practice, over on the mat, so to speak, then I started to recognize, where is my mind out in my life? Where is
yeah,
my mind when I'm talking to someone? Where is my mind when I'm angry? Right.
yeah.
And so I wanted to thank you for that. I mean, I've never told you. It's kind of vague what I'm saying, but
No, but I know
that,
exactly
yeah,
what you
but you
mean.
know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean. But that those experiences you gave
yeah,
really truly created humongous shift for me in my understanding.
yeah. I think, Yolanda, for me, this is essential. I think, as a teacher, for
Hmm.
me, that we create. Um, we have to say something, but these words, we don't even have to create it because it's already here.
Right.
As a teacher, that we realize what is already here. What is already here is our full potential, that we are Reiki, that we are this wide open spaciousness, no beginning, no end, no here, no there, emptiness ultimately. Or Mikao said this wonderful, great bright light,
Hmm.
right? And the more, I think, as a teacher or practitioner, we have tapped into this inner luminosity, then it becomes easier and easier to show it to someone and say, here is it. And then if that person is ready, then they can say, oh, this is what it is. Like
Right.
they can taste it, they can feel it, they can sense it. I was just teaching in Hamburg, and again, I don't like telling these stories, but I'm not trying to say it from a, oh, look what I can do
Right, right.
viewpoint. But what was so wonderful to hear in this class that all of them had a certain direct experience of, oh, where is my body? Where's my beginning? Where's my end? Where's my
Yes.
mind? What is happening? Where is this? I can feel this spaciousness, this openness. And when we have this flavor, this taste of it, I mean, I can talk, for example, about water all what I want, but if you taste it, then at least you know, oh, this is really what water is like,
Yeah.
right? And then we can use that. We can use it to remember it again and again and again. And how is this possible? That is because it already exists.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to create this wide open space because it's already existing. It's like today, I have big windows here and where I live, and I look out into the sky. I'm on the 11th floor. It's very spacious. And last week it was very misty. We didn't see the space,
Yeah.
but the space still existed.
Right.
And most of the time, we don't recognize it because we focus constantly on the clouds. We focus on our anger, our worry, on our tightness. And we constantly also want to work with our tightness, right? It's almost like we want to roll around in our misery and repeat it again and again and again, like this. But that luminosity, that open spaciousness exists already right now. And then when the clouds part, we might say it becomes sunnier, but nothing changed to the sun,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is why we can see within the system of Reiki also that Mikao, for example, in the Japanese way, pointed to the sun and the moon, right? We might say now it's full moon and now it's not full moon, but the moon never changed size, right?
Right.
It's still completely round. It's not that we go up there and suddenly there's only a sliver hanging there and
Yeah.
it shrunk and then it expanded again. The moon is still full. So we are still bright and luminous, except we don't see it because we look at it from the wrong direction for
Yeah.
most of the time. Already from when we were kids, we're kind of almost being taught, look at the painful things, look at the clouds, don't look at the open spaciousness. But you can see it. Kids are just so playful, they're still free, they're still young kids. They don't hold on to their anger for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And then as adults we grow and then we hold on to the anger what normally as a kid we would have dropped 2 minutes later, and we hold on it for 2 years or 20 years, and then we wonder why we got sick in the first place.
Right. Yeah. You
Yeah.
remind me of two things. One, I literally just had a conversation about this yesterday, and I was talking about how, to me, Reiki in a lot of ways is trying to point to what is already there, what's already true, our essence,
Yeah.
but we're just so used to the stories and the experiences of, we could call it lower nature or whatever.
Yeah.
We're just used to certain conditionings. We're used to certain ways of believing who we are, what these labels are, and all of these different things. And then we start these practices and we get these glimpses of, oh, there is actually more to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what made me curious. Like, there's another way of feeling. There's another way of understanding things. There's another way of seeing things. And so it kind of feels like the more and more you come back to the practice, the more and more that aspect of you is revealed, the sun, so to speak.
Yeah.
And but there's also this piece of accepting it. So it's like, I'm having these experiences, but then, also like, wow, can I accept this? And then it's just interesting how it keeps chipping away. And
Yeah.
so this very silly thing happened last night where, you know how on your phone, if you go to the internet, you can open many tabs, like you keep different
Yeah.
websites open. I had like 100 open. I don't know why, but you just think like, oh, I'm going to go back to this. And
Yeah.
so I did something, I don't know what, and I deleted all of them.
Yeah.
And my immediate was like, oh my God. And I had this thought of like, how am I going to remember what I wanted to go back to? And then I started cracking up at myself.
Yeah.
Like, they've been there for over a year and you never went back.
No,
But
but this
that,
is it. Yeah.
yes, but that moment reminded me of these practices of being able to laugh at even something like that rather than attaching to this unnecessary worry or anger about what tabs I didn't look at for over a year.
Yeah. I could show you my phone. I've never, if I Google something on my phone, then the next moment or probably an hour later, I
It's
delete it
gone.
again. Like it's gone. But this is true. The other day, I had a conversation with someone. They were saying, "Oh, I love digging in the past," and I go
Mm.
like, "But what happens when you dig? Imagine the earth. Eh? You're digging. What happens? Yeah, you dig." I said, "And then, well, you create a hole." I said, "And then," I said, "You keep digging." I said, "What happens to the hole? It becomes bigger, and then you keep digging, and then what happens to the hole? Well, it goes deeper and deeper, and then." I go like, they go like, "What are you asking?" I said, "At one point, can you get out of the hole or not?" And I said, "No, you can't." I said, "Yeah, we keep digging so much in the past. And at one point, we can't even get out of it anymore."
Yeah.
And also, because when we do this, this becomes our habitual pattern. And when
Yeah.
we keep watering something, it grows. So it's the same with fear, it's the same with worry, it's the same with anger. When we keep watering it, it grows and we get angry and more angry. And this is, again, the precepts, for example, tell us what do we water on a daily basis? Am I watering my frustration, my anger, my sadness? Oh, poor me. Am I angering situations from the past? Am I watering ideas about the future, what maybe never arrives because maybe I don't wake up tomorrow morning? We don't know, right? Or am I actually watering love and compassion at right this moment?
Hmm.
And this is, for example, exactly what the precepts tell us. Right. And I see this too in so many practices these days. There's so much fear being told and worry. And I go like, yeah, but it's all good and well. I understand maybe for a beginner, right?
Hmm.
But if we have to teach that also in a very specific way to the student, because if they keep watering fear about I'm picking up negative energy from people and
Yeah.
this and this and this, then it only becomes worse. This morning, I had a cup of tea with a friend who I know since I was 16, and she was telling me a story about her daughter who is actually becoming more and more anxious. And that is because he focused constantly on the anxiousness,
Yes.
right? And she said to Frans, he is watering the anxiousness all the time. So that is growing.
Yeah.
And then we become more and more like this. But if it can be like this, what are the opposite, right? Have a look at our true essence. And if we can water this, so for example, when what you were saying that you had this direct experience, or for example, just a class I had in Hamburg where the people had a direct experience of this spaciousness, this openness. Some said, I felt so much love, so much compassion, so much gratitude, not from you, but from inside of them. If we can water that, then that will actually start to manifest more and more and more into our daily lives.
Yeah.
It's in a way, I think all of these spiritual teachings are so simple that for some people it's too simple. We have complicated it. Right? For example, when I often say like in classes, okay, everybody sit down. I said, show me how you touch the universe. Now, some people go like this, or some people go like this. Some people go like, I don't know. And some people go like, you don't have to do anything. Indeed,
Right.
we are already touching the universe inside and out 24 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
So all we have to do is become aware of what we're touching already. We don't have to do anything to make that happen. I don't have to do a practice or say a prayer or chant a mantra or anything to make that happen. I do these practices to become aware that I'm already touching the universe 24/7.
Yes.
And this is the difference. Like, am I aware that in reality, and this is traditionally what the word Reiki was, in Japan, Reiki was Buddha nature or Kami, your inner luminosity, right? Not something what is out there and then we have to pull it through us and out. For example, when we look at Hatsureo, a Japanese Reiki meditation, emanating emanating spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And what means if we emanate it, then we are the source, right? It's like a lamp.
Yeah.
The lamp emanates, the sun emanates. The sun is not channeling light.
Right.
Sun, there's no light comes in from somewhere, goes channeled through the sun and out, right? The sun is emanating it. And so even in the Usui Reiki, there's little booklets where they say the more that we practice, the more we emanating it. And so when we talk about channeling Reiki, we see something as something external,
Right.
and what we constantly have to drag in from somewhere, and then it has to come through the crown. But if we think about it, I'm already touching the universe, not one point here, right?
Yeah.
But my whole body, my whole every organ, every cell is touched by the universe. And this is the same universal space you're being touched by. So we are already like this. We are already interconnected.
Right.
Like, for example, you are in California, I'm here in Holland. I'm not breathing some specific Dutch air and then that stops at the border, right?
Right.
And you're not some specific Californian air and that
Right.
stops at the border. No, we are ready. Every single thing has been breathing the same air for eons.
Right.
And we are ready like this.
I'm laughing because everything you're saying, it's like it keeps pointing back to again, like direction of mind.
Yeah.
And I was just again, this is something I think about a lot. So just say, for example, like the first symbol and the whole concept of, like direct spirit. And I was talking about it before and it just occurred to me. I'm like, but spirit's already there. So it's kind of like it's more instead of literally directing spirit, more so directing our mind to the essence that's already there.
Yeah.
And this thought always comes to mind of, pay attention, bring your awareness to your foot, right? Now, all of a sudden you're aware of your foot, but it was there all day. You just weren't paying attention
Yeah.
to it. And that's essentially like the more we bring our mind back to the awareness of this essence that
Yeah.
already is, the more then we're just in relationship to it, the more we're just aware of it. But
Absolutely.
it's just funny again, no matter what you say, no matter which piece of Reiki or lens you're talking about, it just keeps pointing back to this direction of mind, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, you say that already, for me, the precepts, ultimately also the hands-on healing, the symbols and the mantras, Reiju, the meditation practices, they all are signposts and tools pointing to one and the same thing.
Right.
Your mind, your true nature, your essence, that you are Reiki, you are Kami, you are Buddha nature, you're this great bright light. And the quality of this great bright light is no anger, is no worry, is being grateful, is being true to your way into being, and is a compassion what doesn't change according to circumstances.
Right.
And so when we look at that, then, for example, the first mantra, if we translate it, it's straight spirit or direct spirit, means straight here, but means Frans, remember that straight here or directly now, you're already touching the universe 100%.
Right.
not tomorrow. This is again why Mikao says today, right? He didn't say tomorrow. He didn't say after 20 years of practice. No, he said today, straight spirit. Right now, we are already emanating this light, right? But
Yeah.
again, we don't see it because we're holding on to our anger, our worry, our clouds, our frustration, our sadness. The biggest thing we hold on to is I, me, mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we hold on that false belief of I, me, mine, we go like this. And then when we practice, when we suddenly have maybe that direct experience in a class or during hands-on healing or during Reiki, and we go, oh, I can't even sense the I, me, mine.
Yeah.
There is no I, me, mine. It's just some illusion I've created. I mean, I didn't come out of my mom and say, hey, I'm Frans. That's just some label. And for example, this is the purity of the water and the glass. And now I can see clearly. I can see straight. I can see straight away that this is the water, right? So straight spirit or directly, I can see this is the water. But
Yeah.
if I put a label of Frans here, and in a label, Frans is a man, and in a label, Frans has to be like this, and Frans cannot do this, and Frans is sad about that, and Frans is the, and blah, 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 blah. Now I cannot see directly anymore. I cannot see straight away what is in the glass.
Right.
And if I keep watering these labels and keep focusing on the labels, these labels will only become more and more and more. It becomes a very thick layer,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then we can ask ourselves, even if there's a thick layer of this, of these little sticky tapes or these sticky notes, these labels we've put on it, did it change the water?
No.
No, the water is still there, exactly the way it was.
Right.
Except we don't see it anymore. And now we're going to look for water. Okay, we can't find it. Shit, I'm so thirsty. But actually, it was already there. It's still there. And then when we slowly peel away these labels, we maybe start to see there is the water. The only tricky thing with this is if we keep thinking about, and here, this is a very fine point, and I've only really rediscovered it through my own practice and through my teachers that if we keep focusing, I need to peel these labels away. If I can peel something away, I can also add something.
Mm.
So I'm constantly peeling, adding, right? If one thing can happen, then the other thing can happen as well.
Right.
Right? If this is good, then also something bad can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But what, instead of constantly peeling away these labels, what if I look straight away already in the glass? I don't need to do anything with the labels. And I go, oh, there is the water. There you are. Right?
Yeah.
And I can recognize that straight away
Mm-hmm.
because the water is already here. If I keep busy doing this, maybe in 20 years' time, I've peeled away enough labels that I say, oh, there is the water. But actually, it's already here. So because it's already here, there's a possibility that I can see it today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is what Mikao said. Look at today, straight into your spirit, and see what you can find.
Yes. Well, it's funny because you're mentioning the precept in a way, but also what you're saying again, this is why it's interesting to me. Every aspect of the system keeps pointing to the same thing. It's almost like saying the same thing in different ways. But even as you're describing that, it reminds me of like the second symbol. So we go from this we'll say initiation of, wow, okay, spirit is here, this essence is here. Woo, it's great. But then what you just described sounded like kind of like a way of being able to purify our heart mind is stop attacking the clouds, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then again, just keep bringing the mind back to the water or to the purity.
To the purity. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why I think the system is so incredible because you really can hear all the different components with every example you give.
Yeah, for example, when we look at the Japanese meditation technique taught in Reiki 1, 2, and 3, ultimately, Joshin Kokyo means
Hmm.
pure mind. Joshin, pure mind. So
Hmm.
again, because we said, here's the pure mind, Kokyo, breathing in and out.
Yeah.
And not that in the beginning, we think, this is in the beginning also how I practice, and this also has changed. In the beginning, I thought, oh, I'm going to make my mind pure through
Mm.
the breathing in and out. But then I realized, no, my mind is already pure. My essence is already pure. There's nothing, because if I keep thinking I'm going to make it pure, then I can also make it not pure.
Right.
But if I already realize that purity, right, exists around. So Joshin Kokyo, breathing in through, and every moment we're breathing in and out. So every moment there is this purity. Again, we don't see it
Hmm.
because we focus on the non-purity of things. So this
Right.
Joshin, pure mind, is actually beyond pure and not pure,
Yeah.
right? Is Reiki, is your great bright light, and this is why Mikao and many teachers call it the great bright light, and not light, but great bright light. It's beyond light and dark, right? And what happens, for example, at the moment, the clouds parted and the sun is shining in this room, and the sun comes in, and then all the shadows are gone by itself.
Yeah.
I don't need to do any, I don't have to chase the shadows away. I only have to recognize the light.
Mm.
And the light itself, the sky itself, and this is why Mikao used a lot of these metaphors within his teachings, and we can see this again within the symbols and the mantras, etc., etc. A spacious, open, infinite state of mind. And this infinite open spaciousness is not bothered by the clouds what hang there. It's not bothered by the rainbow or by the lightning. The sky just stays wide and open.
Hmm.
It says, allow everything come in and everything to experience, everything to happen, but I'm not going to be bothered with it. I don't give it any tension. I don't give it any attention. I don't grab it. I don't say, oh, the rainbow is beautiful. It has to stay and no dark clouds. But I like the thunder. Sometimes this is good, but sometimes not. And like this.
Yeah.
So this is, for example, when we look at the second symbol, infinite light traditionally. What means we are already infinite light. We don't make it infinite.
Hmm.
And if I ask my students and I say, okay, can you, and they say, yeah, but my mind is not infinite. I say, well, show me the beginning and end of your mind. And they go like, well, I can't do this. So then it's infinite, right? It's super basic. But
Yeah.
I think also, Yolanda, what we do, like I see all of these practices, no matter if you look at the precepts, redo, the symbols and the mantras, hands-on healing, etc., as signposts. They're pointing to something.
Right.
But what we do these days, the signposts point there, but we're grabbing the signpost and we
Mm.
hold on so tight to the signpost. And then we forgot actually to look where the signpost is pointing at.
Yes.
And what it's pointing at, that already we're touching the universe 100% every single moment of the day. We cannot say, oh, now I just bumped my head. Now it's 80% I'm touching the universe. And
Yeah.
now I have a terrible illness. Now it's 10%. And I feel super happy. Well, now it's almost 95%. Of
Right.
course not.
Right.
This is just some concepts we make up, just like time is just an illusion. The universe doesn't have a magic clock hanging somewhere. And they say, and also the universe is no labels of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or even 2025 is just a concept we have created. We don't exist for 2000 years. We
Right.
exist way longer, right? So these are all labels we have stuck onto this beautiful purity, and therefore we cannot see it anymore. Therefore, we think there is a past and a present and a future, but when we look for it, we cannot even find the whole thing.
Yeah.
becomes just an illusion.
Mm.
And yeah.
I have to ask you one more question before we wrap up this segment with you, because I do want to get deeper into the precepts with you.
Mm.
But I wanted to ask you this in terms of as we start noticing or witnessing shifts and changes within ourselves, a lot of times people may struggle with, how do I say, like losing familiarity with other people around them, or if I really start seeing things in a different way, or I start understanding things differently, will I still have a sense of belonging? Or like if I'm not angry with
Yeah.
everything that everyone else is angry about, then how will I be viewed? I think that's a big challenge for people, especially nowadays. Did you go through that? I mean, what do you?
Yeah, absolutely. I went through a period where I definitely felt that. And luckily, I had really good teachers.
Mhm.
And who, for example, I also worked for 12 years with a Taoist teacher, and she was fantastic. Unfortunately, she passed away, but she was, yeah. And as we also know, Taoism seeped also in Japan. We can see
Mhm.
many similarities. Again, these are just labels. Just also, there is no Taoist enlightenment, and there's a different box of Reiki enlightenment and yoga enlightenment. These are all crazy ideas we have come up with.
Yeah.
So I definitely went through that. And one of the things, is don't get attached to the experiences, let them
Mhm.
come and go. So, for example, if we keep attached to the clouds, right, then in traditional teaching to say we bound by a rusty chain, right? But if we get attached to this wide open spaciousness, this openness. Oh, look what I can do. Look what I can feel. Look at what I can sense. Oh, I can sense this. I can. Then we're attached still to these experiences,
Yeah.
right? And then we're bound by an iron chain, but we're still bound, right?
Right.
And this is when we actually have to soften I, me, mine, because then we can ask ourselves, who is finding it too much? Who is saying, I don't belong here? Who is saying these are not my friends anymore? I, me, mine.
Right.
So when we soften this, and this is why it's so important. Um, I quite, I still do this. I go dancing. I like to have a good party. I don't need to be a spiritual person.
Yeah.
Right? This is, I think, also what we these days. Oh, and don't get me wrong, it's fine. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but we have to look in a certain way to be spiritual. What
Right.
does that mean? You know, spirituality is not in a bracelet or a necklace or the color of my clothing or a hat or in some words I say that I can't say the F word or I can't do this or I can't go dancing or I can't eat drink or eat a beer or a wine or a piece of meat or whatever, then suddenly you're not spiritual anymore. I mean, this is also something we have created in a very confused ideas.
Mhm.
So therefore, then most of the time we say, oh yeah, but that person is drinking or that person is going dancing. That is not very spiritual, isn't it? You know, and then we have to put this spiritual voice on, whatever that might mean.
Right.
Like, and so in Holland, we have this saying, just be normal, right? Just be normal.
Yeah.
And actually, the tradition where my teacher come from in Japan, my teacher's own teacher was Sakai Daijari. He was one of the most famous marathon monks in Japan. And in their tradition, is said that you are not special. You just become your ordinary self.
Mhm.
But this is again, who is looking to be special? We
Yeah.
see this also, like in healing. We only have to open up the internet or Instagram or like, and we have all these special people. Oh, look what I can do. I become so special. I'm special, Emin. But
Yeah.
it's the ego. It's just I, me, mine.
Yes.
And when we operate like this, again, we dig ourselves a big hole because we haven't really dealt with I, me, mine yet.
Mhm.
What is actually the foundation of a spiritual practice?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you say because people stress themselves out with trying to fit in these boxes and all these rules
Yeah,
and all these ideas. And I think it's just, that highlighting, like underline that word, their ideas. And you have to
yeah,
even think, where did they even come from? Who came up with these rules? And I have to say, I mean, that's really one of the things about you that, like oddly enough, I think is so spiritual, so to speak, is that you are so playful. I mean,
yeah.
it's just you beam this kind of joy and being in your presence and how you are, how all of us are expressing is infectious. Like we can all
Well,
feel.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
why wouldn't you be fortunate really to be around someone who is expressing this playfulness and this joyfulness?
yeah.
And, why wouldn't you want to not only experience that, but to be around that more, especially in contrast to what so much is going on? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I went dancing 2 weeks ago into this club here, and this is, funnily enough, not the first time in the last 6 months. This happened a lot when I go dancing.
Yeah.
Again, I don't normally like to talk about it, but these are just great examples. I'm dancing away, and this woman comes up to me and said, "Wow, you're shining. You're so bright. You're so happy." I said, "And you're dancing so freely.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for being." Almost he was saying, for being an example like this.
Right.
And we all know, if you can be like this, then ultimately we give a permission for the other person to smile, to say good morning, how are you, to shine their light and
Right.
not find it strange. Like
Yeah.
sometimes people say, "Oh, but I have to dim my light." Oh, why? Right? It's the same. Sometimes people say, "I have to switch off Reiki." Why?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You cannot switch it off because we're touching the universe 24 hours a day. We cannot at somewhere stage go like, click. Now I'm not touching the universe anymore.
Yeah.
Impossible.
Yeah.
And then, in other words, we can also look at the precept. Why would you switch off? No anger, no worry, being grateful, being true to your way, and you're being compassionate. Wouldn't
Right.
it be great if we could emanate that 24 hours a day?
Yeah.
Imagine every single person in the world doing that without switching it off or covering it up. We have heaven on earth,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I want to talk to you more about that because that is I have to just make a note. In our next conversation together, there are so many things that I still have to ask you, but you gave so many beautiful examples just in this exchange, which I knew it was going to be a good time speaking with you. So I just want to say thank you again. And for everyone listening, you'll have to tune in to part two to hear more about this concept, this idea of Reiki turning on and off. But then also, I have some questions for you about the precepts, if we can dive a little deeper into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
So we will be back with you for part two, going deeper with Frans. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, beautiful alchemist. I hope you enjoyed that first hour with Frans. And I just want to say thank you to Frans again for taking the time to sit with me for 3 whole hours. It was a lot of fun. But I hope that you all got a lot from that conversation. Would love to hear what came up for you. And if you want to learn more about Franz and his work, again, you can visit his website, ihreiki.com, and you can follow him on Instagram at Stiene Franz. And again, I will put the links for that down in the show description. And I look forward to seeing you in the second hour of our time with Frans, which will air on Wednesday. And in part two, we talk a lot about our paths being unique. We talk about us as students being at different levels, the evolution through our practice. There's just a lot that we tackle in the second hour that I'm sure will support you and you will enjoy. So I will see you next time. Thank you so very much for being here. And remember to always journey in love.